All right, let's get right into it. We hear the term natural disaster thrown around all the time, right? An earthquake, a hurricane, a flood. It makes it sound like this random act of nature that's totally out of our hands. But what if that's not really the full picture? What if the disaster part of that phrase has less to do with the earth shaking and a lot more to do with, well, us? That's exactly what we're going to unpack.
So, let's start with the big question this slide is asking. When a massive flood sweeps through a town, is that purely an act of nature? Or do the choices we've made as a society, like where we build our homes, who gets resources and who doesn't, play an even bigger role in the devastation? That's the core idea we're going to dig into.
So how do we even begin to answer that question? Well, lucky for us, there's this really smart framework called the Pressure and Release Model, or PAR for short. Think of it like our decoder ring for disasters. It argues that a disaster isn't just the hazard itself. Nope, it's what happens when that hazard collides with a vulnerable group of people. It's a story about two powerful forces meeting.
Now, the PAR model tells us that this vulnerability is built up in stages. The best way to think about it is like peeling back the layers of an onion. We're going to start with that outer layer, the stuff you can see, the most obvious part of the problem. These are the unsafe conditions people find themselves in right before a hazard strikes.
And this slide shows you exactly what those conditions look like on the ground. We're talking about people forced to live on unstable hillsides or in low-lying areas prone to flooding, often because there's just nowhere else to go. It's about having a job or a farm that can be completely wiped out overnight. It's living in a building made with flimsy materials that's going to crumble in an earthquake. Or it could be as simple as not having a warning system that gives you those few crucial minutes you need to get to safety. These are those immediate, in-your-face dangers.
But that just leads to the next question, doesn't it? I mean, most people don't wake up and choose to live in a dangerous spot or in a poorly built house. So why are they there? To get that answer, we have to peel back the next layer of our onion.
And here we go, peeling back that layer. This is what the PAR model calls dynamic pressures. Think of these as the bigger, society-wide forces that are actively pushing people into those unsafe situations we just talked about.
Okay, so for example, think about a city that's growing way too fast. That's rapid urbanization. People are flocking there for work, but there isn't enough safe, affordable housing. So what happens? People end up building informal settlements on whatever land is left, which is usually the most dangerous land. Or take a lack of investment in education. That can limit people's job options, forcing them into less secure work. See, these aren't really individual choices. They're large-scale pressures squeezing entire communities into risky spots.
I think you can see where this is going, can't you? These huge pressures, they don't just appear out of thin air. There's something even deeper, something bigger driving them. So, to get to the absolute heart of the matter, we have to dig one final level deeper.
And here we are, the very core of the onion, the root causes. These are the deep, fundamental, and often totally invisible economic, political, and social structures of a society. This right here is the real starting point for that whole chain reaction of vulnerability.
The key thing to get here is that these are the big picture issues that shape everything else. We're talking about systems that give some people access to power and money while locking others out. Think about deep-seated economic inequality or historical events from generations ago that still affect people today. This is the very foundation that all those other layers of vulnerability get built on top of.
Okay, so we've followed this whole progression of vulnerability from its deepest roots all the way to the dangerous surface. Now, let's bring it all together. Let's see what happens when that massive societal pressure finally slams into a force of nature. This slide just lays it out so perfectly. On one side, you've got that whole chain reaction we just unpacked. The root causes create the dynamic pressures which lead to unsafe conditions. That's the built-up societal pressure. And on the other side, you've got the raw power of nature, the earthquake, the flood, the volcano. The disaster, it happens right there in the middle, where those two forces crash into each other. And this, right here, is probably the most important takeaway of this whole explainer. An earthquake that hits an empty desert is just a geological event. It's not a disaster. A disaster is a social event. It's what happens when that same earthquake hits a city full of people living in poorly built homes because they never had the power or the resources to live anywhere safer. The hazard is the trigger, sure, but our vulnerability is what really loads the gun.
Now, this might all sound a little bit depressing, I know. But here's the amazing and honestly really hopeful flip side. If disasters are largely caused by our own human systems, that means we have the power to unmake them. Just like this quote says, they are not inevitable. We can absolutely reduce their impact. We can step in.
So how do we do that? Well, the beauty of the pressure and release model is that it's not just a diagnosis of the problem. It actually shows us the path to the solutions. It's all about finding ways to release the pressure before the hazard even shows up.
We can basically work our way backward through those same layers. So first, on the surface, we can tackle the unsafe conditions with things like better building codes and early warning systems. Easy enough. Next, we can push back against those dynamic pressures by investing in education and creating more opportunities for people. And finally, this is the hardest, but also the most important step. We can work to transform the root causes by pushing for fair economic policies and more inclusive ways of governing.
So really, the ultimate point is this. It's always tempting to just focus on the engineering fix, like building a bigger seawall. But what this model teaches us is that real, lasting resilience comes from building a fairer, more equitable society. By fixing the reasons why people are vulnerable in the first place, we make the whole community stronger from the inside out.
And that leaves us with a final, pretty powerful thought. When we look at disasters this way, the whole idea of responsibility shifts, doesn't it? They're not just bad luck or an act of God. They are the predictable outcomes of the systems we've all built. So if we know that, what are we waiting for?